remember, I didn't grow up on a farm. I actually grew up in the kitchen. So I liken it to chefs. I can go into any restaurant and I know that it is very different. Each chef is different, all the staff is different, and the recipes that they make are totally different. And the only thing that also changes is those recipes that you're making in that kitchen. Now you got this thing called Mother Nature coming in and saying, I was going to cook this for 350 degrees, that muffin, but oh my gosh, I can't get it quite to 350 degrees. I can't quite get enough water. So how am I going to make that muffin and serve it at that coffee shop, right? So we need to do a better job of explaining, when I go to HGTV or watch all these cooking shows, I know it's a complicated business, right? But with our farmers, we have to show that there's stuff that's happening that you see above this green stuff, but that there's stuff that's cooking right below, underneath the soil.
Well, welcome back to Farmside Chat. I'm Zippy Duvall, I'm President of American Farm Bureau and the host for today. I really enjoy doing this podcast. It gives me an opportunity to bring farmers and ranchers to your headset or to your phone so that you can hear what's going on their farms all across America. And today we're going to talk about a subject that seems like everybody's talking about, and that's sustainability. And, I can talk about sustainability on my farm, but the stories that I get from farmers and ranchers and the ones I get to visit with you on this podcast come straight from their farms and straight from their hearts. And I know that you enjoy listening to them to see what reality really is like on the farm. But today, I have a great guest with me today. I got Erin Fitzgerald, who's going to help me talk about sustainability on the farm. She is the CEO at U.S. Farm Ranch in Action. We call it USFRA, that our organization here at American Farm Bureau played a major role in when this organization was started. So welcome, Erin, to the Farmside Chat.
Welcome, Zippy. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I look forward to that. Erin and I know a lot about what's going on in the farms and what our farmers and ranchers have done in the sustainability area. But we also have the opportunity to see ahead what might be coming down the pipeline in the future to help farmers, that's going to be helping farmers and ranchers take that next step. And before we get to talking about that, I would love for Erin to tell us a little bit more about USFRA so that our listeners understand her point of view and also her background, what brought her to being an advocate for agriculture at USFRA. Erin?
Hey, Zippy, thank you. So we say U.S. Farmers and Ranchers in Action because we fundamentally believe that people are looking for leaders in action. And there's no greater place to look than in agriculture. We even say agriculture, a culture of people that are taking that action on the farm and really are working for our community and the planet. And we changed our name to really reflect that, saying, the world's looking for this decade of action. We need to make sure that we're bringing the food and agriculture leaders together to take action on a common vision that we can work on together, and that we take action on our farms. And we look at history, we look at what we've been doing to improve our carbon footprint, improve our soils. We've been learning a lot, and we've got a lot of great opportunities in the future as we think about being a solution and a contributor to climate change, but it's going to take unprecedented leadership in action. And our organization is really about bringing the people together to go get that done.
So, Erin, tell us a little bit about you personally and what brought you to the USFRA.
Yeah, when you work in agriculture, I think everyone always says that they grew up on a farm, and I always, chagrin and say I did not. I came to agriculture after really hating my job. I was working in downtown Chicago, getting off at the 23rd floor, working on finance, and I worked in healthcare, and I just really didn't like it. And I went to this meeting saying, follow life's purpose, right? And the guy that I got off at the elevator with on the 23rd floor of the big skyscraper where it's 70 degrees and fluorescent, it was the guy that was giving the lecture on finding life's purpose. And I went up to him afterwards and said, I get off every day at that 23rd floor, say hi to you and wave, and we go our separate ways. You need to find me a job. And he said, I do know of the Dairy Management Inc., the dairy sector. And I said, that's great. I want to be in the food industry. I care, and I could eat cheese. Fine, hook me up. And so that's how I just really wanted to be in the food and agriculture sector, and just saw it as like the place where joy happens, the place where nature happens, and where people happen. So from that moment on, I took a pivot and never looked back.
Well, we're glad to have you involved in advocating for our country's largest industry and the wonderful people that work in and around it. You mentioned a little while ago about a decade in agriculture. So tell us about the decade of ag.
Okay, so when in 2019, we asked a really simple question: where are we going? Where are we going to be by 2030 as a sector? And as you guys listeners may or may not be aware, there's this really important effort called the Sustainable Development Goals. And it's 197 presidents of nations that said, the greatest challenge of our time, they launched 17 goals to make certain that by 2030, we are truly activating on those. Now, as part of that, goal number 2 is, how are we going to truly nourish people in the face of one of the greatest challenges of our time, which is climate change? And we're in agriculture, and we grow food in the face of Mother Nature. And so that's going to be a challenge. So how are we going to do that? And, lo and behold, in 2019, that was right before we saw some episodic events, and supply chain disruption. Zippy, we shook hands right before COVID. You were the last person I saw. And it's one of those things like, did we imagine that would happen? So how do we come together as leaders? How do we lead for the future and really raise the awareness and investment in the sector to meet those goals, to fulfill our potential? We know we're capable. We've got capable people. We've got capable soils. But often it's the business model that we need to invest in for the future by 2030.
And it's so important for us to make that investment and provide the leadership, because really and truly the story of American agriculture is not really broadly known across America. People I think are very interested in where their food comes from, and I think that's a great opportunity for us to tell our story. And we're going to talk about some of the ways we tell the story. But the story I tell on my farm, and I'm not throwing my grandfather under the bus or my dad, but they used the tools that was available to them in those decades that they ran the farm. And I've used the ones I've had, and our farm has come so far because my grandfather came there right after cotton. The boll weevil came through and wiped it out, and sharecrop farming, and it was just, just raw dirt, and everything was washing down into the rivers. And now with poultry houses and the litter that I use and all the soil science that we've done and all the conservation programs that we've been involved in, some through USDA, we've built our farm back. The soils are healthy. It's a rolling green mass of grass now with cows eating the grass off of it. And it really, truly is a magnificent story. And it's just one example of what's happened all across this country. And unfortunately, we're being painted in a different light by certain media outlets and others. I've seen a lot about that just this week. And it's leading people's opinion of American agriculture in the wrong way. And so telling our story are thankful. Now, I'm thankful through this podcast that my listeners, and I understand from my staff that most of the people that listen to this podcast are not farmers. They're urban people that live in urban areas that are interested in agriculture. So I'm thankful that they want to learn more about what we're doing by listening to this channel. And I'm also thankful that they're willing to listen to the stories. Through our studies, we found out that the American public trust the American farmer. Almost 88% of the people we polled said they trust the farmers and ranchers across this country. And that's something we don't take for granted. We try to work hard every day to keep that trust that they have in us. But I know your team works real hard to tell the farmer story. Can you tell us a little bit how your team does that?
Well, Zippy, definitely. We work with your team as well. I mean, it's a shared effort. I appreciate you talking about, what is happening on your farm. And there's so many farmers doing amazing work. And so I think part of it is exactly what you said. We're not, every farmer is very different and unique, and the acreage underneath their feet is super unique. So remember, I didn't grow up on a farm. I actually grew up in the kitchen. So I liken it to chefs. I can go into any restaurant and I know that it is very different. Each chef is different, all the staff is different, and the recipes that they make are totally different. And the only thing that also changes is those recipes that you're making in that kitchen. Now you got this thing called Mother Nature coming in and saying, I was going to cook this for 350 degrees, that muffin, but oh my gosh, I can't get it quite to 350 degrees. I can't quite get enough water. So how am I going to make that muffin and serve it at that coffee shop, right? So we need to do a better job of explaining, when I go to HGTV or watch all these cooking shows, I know it's a complicated business, right? But with our farmers, we have to show that there's stuff that's happening that you see above this green stuff, but that there's stuff that's cooking right below, underneath the soil. Often I get questions about the cow. As you know, I was in the dairy sector. I had to learn that cow, my goodness, it does more than milk and meat. Like it's part of my leather. It makes bio-based products. It's got 450 little bugs in the stomach. And then it does this amazing thing called poop. It's brown gold. That gets the soil moving. So I think I come at it from really asking and learning from our farmers, and I hope that through this podcast and our work that we really show and tell the hyper precision of the recipes that each one of our farmers are doing on their farms in the face of climate change. So it's even more complicated, right? But we got a lot to do. It's more than just a show and tell. Part of it is making certain that the science is there. We are explaining the science, which is often just as complicated as well as explaining green things.
Yeah. You talked about the soil and how the cow, I mean, it's a revolving ecosystem between the cow, carbon, grass, milk, meat, and all of it is just a tremendous thing that happens. But, a lot of people don't really understand that some of the things that our farmers are doing as far as soil health. Right now, a big percentage of our farms are using no-till, low-till. Just about half of all the acres of corn and soybean, cotton and wheat are that way. We've increased the use of cover crop. Cover crop is something that you plant on the ground to hold the soil together, hold the moisture in while you're not growing a crop that you're going to grow and harvest and sell. Now, cover crops don't work everywhere. We'll never have every acre in it because in a lot of the areas of the country where there's no growing season, it's so cold they can't grow a cover crop. Or if they're in a dry area, they wouldn't want a plant taking up the moisture that's needs to be there for the next plant that comes along. So that doesn't solve all the problems, but it's a question of carbon. If you just think about the millions of acres of land, like my land where my cows roam, all that grass is sequestering carbon that other industries are putting out each and every day. We get a bad rap about emissions and cattle. Everybody wants to say that cattle is going to destroy our planet. And really and truly, all the emissions from American agriculture is about 10%, and cattle only represents about 2% of that, 2 or 3% of that. So that just really facts that aren't true and factual that are being fed. But I think one of the most astounding statistics that I talk about a lot is if farmers were out to ruin the planet, why would they voluntarily take 140 million acres of their own land that they bought and pay taxes on every year and put it in conservation programs? They're doing it to protect our soils, protect the environment, and to keep our planet healthy. And if you think about 140 million acres, that's the size of California and New York State put together of privately owned land that farmers and ranchers are voluntarily doing that. So we have great stories that we talk about. So, as farmers, we're not going to hang our hat where we're at. We're all going to work to do more in the future, just like we always have from generation to generation. But there are some new concepts out there, new things that's coming down the pipe. And Erin, would you like to talk about some of those that are going to help us to have better tools?
Yeah, well, so Zippy, I think that's one of the things. So, like when we talk about climate change and carbon, one, we're already talking about agriculture, so it's complex, right? But the other is that people don't always understand about carbon. So you mentioned that it's 10% of greenhouse gases. But that's the way we do our math in carbon accounting, right? It's all equivalent. So 10%, okay, that gets you an idea of where carbon impact. But you have to also understand where impact happens. So I'll use this little water bottle, okay? I did the body armor or whatever. But this is derived from black carbon. So that's like nature's carbon that's been stored under the ground for thousands of years, usually through plants, and then we emit it into the air. But if I recycle this, that means that it's gray carbon. I'm cycling. I'm keeping it. I don't have to go get back and go back and tap into virgin black carbon or spew it into the air. Green carbon, though, comes from the sun and through the process of photosynthesis, and it's cycled. So agriculture's carbon, while it is part of the emissions, is very, very, very different. It's coming from the sun, it's processed through our plants and animals, and is cycled for 2030, 2040, 2050. Now, why does that matter? Because when we sequester, when we do that little cover crop, or we're doing these little techniques, those little actions, and that's why we say leaders in action, those little actions we take start cycling through the sun and our soils by 2030, 2040, 2050. So it's very important when our farmers take an action and come up with new technologies, new actions, we're literally paying it forward. You also mentioned about conservation and conservation lands. The way I think about agriculture is, again, coming back from that urban environment where I was working, is that this is where the green spaces are. Okay, this is where the flyways are. This is where, if I want to do afforestation, plant more trees, it's going to happen on these lands. I want to plant wind and solar for the renewable energy goals, it's going to happen on these lands. It's these lands that where you see green happen. It's these lands, you could think about it, our rangelands and our croplands as managing and cycling those green spaces. Now, there's another alarming statistic that we're losing 87 acres of farmland an hour. Once that land is paved over, I can go watch Yellowstone if you want, if you're going to get a more Hollywood version of this. Once that land is paved over, that's gone. So our working lands are critical in this conversation of cycling carbon for our children and grandchildren. Again, we got to think about 2030, 2040, 2050. So green carbon is the most important thing in the conversation of climate change. And so we want to make certain that our farmers are innovating in this cover crops and all these things to cycle that carbon.
That's exactly right. And you talk about once you pave over a piece of land that it never grows a crop again, and that cycle's not there anymore. And really and truly, that is even more harmful. But we have to have places for people to live and business for them to work at. We all understand that. But it reminded me of a story when you tell I was riding north of town one day toward Athens from my farm, and my son was about 10 years old, and he was sitting there in the truck seat beside me, and he's now a veterinarian and farming with me. But we went through in this beautiful farm and sold their land, and there was high density housing being built on it. And he looked over at it at 10 years old, and he said to me, he said, "Daddy, promise me our farm won't never look like that."
Wow.
And, it really touched my heart. And, not many things that the 10-year-old says goes very deep, but he was really thinking forward and being cautious about what might happen to our farm itself. And it's just wonderful to have children that are tied to the land like that. And that's what people don't understand. We love our land and we love our animals, and we want to take care of both of them as best we can so that I can pass it on to my son, and he can pass it on to his children. and continue to grow the food and fiber for the world. So many great stories out there, and I know that y'all do and we do have wonderful ways to share those stories so that our audience can continue to learn. Because our job is to make sure that not only do we continue to do better on our farms, but as an organization, we want to make sure that our farmers are not protected, but treated like partners. We want to be treated like partners as we move forward with everybody else in this country to make sure that we continue to do the right things. And you can go to our sustainability page because we've asked farmers through our hashtag Still Farming to tell their sustainability stories, and they've done it by the thousands. And we've had over 100 million people look at that hashtag Still Farming to see some of those stories. But I know that y'all have a website too, and you tell some of those stories and have done some, I guess you call them documentaries. So you want to talk about that a little bit, Erin?
Yeah, I mean, it's very, as we say, every farmer, every acre, every leader in action. So we know that every farmer is unique. So one of the things we try to do, as you do, is just to highlight the uniqueness of each one of those leaders. We have a couple films out there. One's called 30 Harvest. The other one's Carbon Neutral Pig. And it's part of a series of really showcasing one farmer, one leader in action, their story, which is often more than just what you see on their soils and more than the land that they walk. There's always the personal struggles, just like anyone, to leave a business better than you found it, right? And would love for anyone to get out there and take a watch. I know that some of these films recently were called Slick. I will say that they're real people. The film 30 Harvest, there's a little girl in that film, and her name is Harvest. So it's really about, we have 30 years till 2050. We've got 30 chances in the face of climate change to get that right. Or for our farmers, that's 30 harvests. Or you could say for this little girl, that's her livelihood. So would just really encourage anyone to take a look and watch those films.
And two, we're gonna wind this podcast up with sustainability videos. We've done 3 farmers across America. I rolled that video out at our national convention to almost 4,000 farmers, and it takes 3 different types of farmers from 3 different regions of the country that farm different things and have different sustainability projects going on their farm. So I invite everybody to, if you don't get to see it after this podcast, that you can go to AFBF's YouTube channel on fb.org/sustainability and watch them for yourself. Well, I've told you where you could hear our stories at and ask us questions about what you might want answered about today's discussion. But also, I'd like to give Erin an opportunity to tell you where you can go and tap into USFRA's information and let them answer some questions you might have for them. Erin?
Thanks, Zippy. Yeah, so if you want to get involved, you can go to usfarmersandranchers.org. And if you want to get involved in the Decade of Ag, just Google there, and we're looking for all volunteers. Would love to put your strengths to work. Thanks.
So I want to thank you, Erin, for joining me today. But as I do every guest, I want to give you a part of the last word and see if there's anything else you'd like to add to our conversation.
Well, thank you, Zippy, and just thanks, Scott. We're grateful for our partnership, grateful for all the work that you and all the farmers are doing, and I'll look forward to the rest of the podcast. It sounds like we got some amazing farmers on the line right after me. I can't wait to hear.
Yeah, it'll be good.
I would invite
our listeners, if they have any questions that they'd like answered on my podcast, or something you've heard today you'd like to answer the question to, just please email them to Farmside Chat. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Farmside Chat. Please be sure to subscribe so that you never miss an episode. And while you're at it, take a minute to rate and review the podcast. This helps us continue to bring you farm fresh content that everyone can enjoy. Until next time, thank you and God bless you.